Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Monday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. Been a week since I've recorded anything, and man, oh man, did I miss a lot. I had a couple of ideas last week to record and didn't get a chance to for a couple of different reasons. I won't go into any of those now, just that I regret the fact that I couldn't, because man, I have a lot of stuff to try to catch up on. I'm going to cherry pick a little bit today and just touch on a few of the news items from last week. The general manager meetings are over, and this week we have deGrom to look forward to, his being crowned Cy Young, and then we got the winter meetings. So let's get into it today and go over what we've missed in the last 7. So Brodie Van Wagenen is putting his stamp on the team slowly but surely. A couple of personnel changes to speak of from last week. One, Ruben Amaro Jr. will no longer be the first base coach. He is going to shift into a front office role with the team. Glenn Sherlock will shift over to first base from third. Last year's bench coach, Gary DiSarcina, will become the new third base coach, and there's now a vacancy for the bench coach. There was also a couple of other coaching shakeups. Pat Rossler will not be back, and Ricky Bonas will be reassigned. And, those are all sort of expected sorts of things. Perhaps this will be a chance for Brodie and Mickey Callaway to work closely together to assign members of Mickey's coaching staff, but we'll see how that unfolds. The more pertinent one for me is the announcement yesterday that JP Ricciardi will not be returning. Mutually parted ways with the team did JP Ricciardi, who has been with the Mets for 8 seasons. So I liked Ricciardi a lot. I think mainly because of my Moneyball bias. I kind of like the fact that Ricciardi was with the Mets. But whatever. He'll land on his feet. He'll be just fine, and I think the Mets will be okay without him. So that's the front office stuff that's gone on. Not much in terms of on-field stuff, outside of a ton of rumors, and I mean a ton of rumors. So I'll try to go into some of them that I read over the last week or so that I think are sort of worth discussing. One is first base. This was reported a couple of times, not reported, this was rumored about, I'll put it that way, or written about a couple of times over the last few weeks, that the Diamondbacks were going to be shopping Paul Goldschmidt this winter. And of course, doing their jobs, the Mets beat writers all suggest, hey, Goldie would be a great fit for the Mets. I got to disagree with that. Only because if there's one area where there's a surplus, it is first base. And what do you do with Peter Alonso? What do you do with Dominic Smith? What do you do with Wilmer Flores? What do you do with Jay Bruce? As nice as it might be to have a perennial MVP candidate like Goldschmidt in the lineup and playing first base every day, I just don't think it's a good fit. I think that's just a rumor to be written about and nothing more. The other one, of course, is across the diamond, and it's Manny Machado. And there's a real division amongst Mets Twitter about Machado and whether he should or should not be signed. I'm in the should not be signed camp, only because I just don't like the idea of spending that much money on one player. I don't care who the player is. I really don't. For me, the only player in baseball who's worth the kind of money that Machado and Harper both want to make is Mike Trout. Period. I don't care what anybody else says. Mike Trout is the only player who's worth that money. And even that's a stretch for me. But yesterday there was some reports that said Mets officials are saying that Machado and the Mets are not a good fit. And I don't know that I agree with that. I think anyone who's got eyes knows the Mets need a stable third baseman, and that Machado would certainly be the guy to lock that down. He's young, he's 26 years old, he'd be under team control for as long as his contract might be, he can hit. So I don't agree with the no fit. I just wish they would come out and say, we're not spending that kind of money on one player, we have other needs. And the sort of counter to the Machado argument is something else that I read yesterday, a rumor about the Cubs shopping Chris Bryant. And this seems to be pretty legit. This seems to be something the Cubs are really doing. And I don't remember if it was Joel Sherman or someone else who posted that, or who's sort of like opined that the Mets should get in on the Kris Bryant sweepstakes and that Noah Syndergaard should be the centerpiece in that trade proposal. And it makes a lot of sense to have Syndergaard, basically, excuse me, both teams dealing from positions of strength. The Cubs have a surplus of offense, and the Mets have a lot of pitching. I won't say a surplus, but a lot of pitching. The Cubs have made it to the World Series the last couple of years, or not the last couple of years, they made it to the playoffs, but they didn't get as far as they would have liked, and it's because they don't have that lockdown ace starting pitcher. And so the rumors are there about Bryant, not rumors, the possibility is there, rather, that Kris Bryant might be available in a trade. Now, I don't know that it's going to be a straight-up thing that the Mets would have to offer. I don't think that Bryant for Syndergaard straight up is going to get it done. I think there's going to have to be other players involved in that trade. I don't know who they might be, but I'd love for the Cubs to throw in like one of their bench utility infielder guys. And his name is escaping me now, but he was on my fantasy team last year and the year before. Ian Happ, that's what I'm thinking of. He can play the outfield, he can play the infield. That'd be another guy, a really nice guy to get in that deal if the Mets are forced to have to sweeten it. And again, this is not really happening. This is just, conjecture and discussion and nothing more. There's no evidence to support any of this stuff. It's just fun banter, rumor stuff. Finally, the catching situation, we'll touch on a little bit here, and another Mets Twitter gaffe, in my opinion, getting pissed off about and talking about how the Mets are already bargain shopping. Talking about reuniting with Asdrubal Cabrera and catching, going with a guy like Martin Maldonado as the catcher, and I don't know. I mean, again, these are all rumors. It's all early. No one knows what the hell's going on. I'm annoyed with the fact that Mets Twitter is already labeling Brodie Van Wagenen as Sandy Alderson 2.0 and talking once again about how the general manager has no control at all, and it's the Wilpons that pull the strings. I have to tell you, that argument to me is losing its luster. Now, I've long believed that it's true, that the Wilpons absolutely meddle in the day-to-day business of the Mets. But let's think about this logically here. Why would a guy like Brodie Van Wagenen, was making probably 30 or 40 or 50 times annually what he's going to make as the general manager of the Mets, why would he leave all that money on the table for an opportunity that is going to only make him basically a puppet? Why would he do that? That's the evidence against the Wilpons don't give the general manager any control at all. I would argue that it's been made abundantly clear that the general manager does have some control, and not unilateral control. He's going to have to go through the motions and inform his owners about what he wants to do. I mean, that's baseball 101. That's sports ownership 101. But I reject this notion that he's a puppet, and it's why I got angry reading about the Martin Maldonado thing, and that sort of sparked it with me. There was some backlash about the Mets are content with a guy like Martin Maldonado, who's a terrible catcher. And I'm paraphrasing. I don't think anybody actually said that. But A, he's not a terrible catcher. In fact, he's a very good defensive catcher. And B, if you look at what the Red Sox did this year, they put the catcher, the person they put behind the plate, that was easy for me to say, person they put behind the plate as the catcher was a defense-first kind of guy. He was not an offensive powerhouse. He was a defensive specialist. He was a guy who could call a good game, who can block all the pitches, who can throw runners out, and that was clearly a recipe for success. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that the 2019 Mets are going to be anywhere near as successful or have the talent anywhere near the level of the 2018 Boston Red Sox did. But what I am saying is that if you look at what a team like that did to build their team, they built their team around a strong defensive catcher where offense was a luxury but wasn't a necessity. And that's, I think, the difference between a guy like Martin Maldonado, who's not going to cost you a ton of money, mind you, and a guy like Wilson Ramos. And I would love to see the Mets get Wilson Ramos. But he's always injured. He's getting up there in age, and he's going to cost a pretty good chunk of money. And I think you can get a guy who's going to bring more to the table defensively in Maldonado for a whole lot less money. And he'll be on the field more often. And maybe he won't provide the same level of offense as a Ramos might, but I'm willing to sacrifice that to bolster the defense behind this pitching staff. And that's where I stand on the catching situation. Grandal and Ramos, they're big names. They sound great. But I would much rather have a little bit of extra, the little bit of extra funding that the Mets might have available. I'd much rather see them use that in the bullpen and not waste it on, I'm not going to say waste it, but not spend it on a catcher. Not when you can get a guy like Maldonado. And I think that was the point. It wasn't like, let's cheap out and get Maldonado. I think the idea is let's spend this money elsewhere because there's a guy like Maldonado that we could get for half the price of a Wilson Ramos. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why there's this equation in place that says if you don't spend, you don't win. I mean, you look at payroll across baseball. It does not always dictate success. In fact, oftentimes it does not dictate success. So before we get all huffy-puffy about the Mets cheaping things out, let's actually let them do something and then react to it, as opposed to reading a rumor and reacting to that and labeling Brodie Van Wagenen, who's been on the job for all of a week, as Sandy Alderson 2.0 and a puppet. End rant, off soapbox. That'll wrap it up for today. I'm going to do my best to record at least one more video this week. I can't go another week without recording because there's just been too much going on. And again, as I said as we kicked off today, Jacob deGrom is going to be awarded the National League Cy Young this year. So I think I'll probably have a video out when we hear that news officially come through. I think that's on the 14th that gets announced. So that'll be fun. So we'll do that then, either the day of or the day after, or whatever. We'll figure it out. But I will definitely be back at least one more time this week. Until then, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met. And as always, let's go Mets.